Throughout the history of Pokémon, the Uber tier has been almost the exclusive province of legendaries, with only 3 non-legendaries being able to break in. 2 of them were Salamence and Garchomp, but they sported stats on par with many legendaries, which left only 1 Pokémon with inferior stats that ever broke in the Uber tier, that being Wobbuffet. Throughout generations 3 and 4, this beast proved to be pretty much unbeatable with a clever combination of Shadow Tag, Encore, Counter, and Mirror Coat. However, this can be only described as gimmicky. So this means no non-legendary, non-pseudo-legendary has ever broken the Uber tier for simply being too good. Until yesterday. Yep, the first entry in the just too damn strong department that had a stat total below 600. And it's Blaziken. Yep, the giant flaming chicken got even for all the years of ridicule for being inferior to Infernape in every possible way, in a big, big, big way. But how did this happen? When it was first announced, I think everyone's reaction was the same. What the hell? Smogon jumped the shark for sure on this one. But looking at it in an objective way, looking at every side of the story, I can say that this was actually a pretty good call. No matter what any noob from GameFAQs might say, and one of them even made a poem that got posted on Smogon's forums, though that poem sort of made its complaints invalid on the grounds that it pretended that no non-legendary should ever be considered Uber. Yep, total loss of credibility right there. There are horrible legendaries just like they're really awesome non-legendaries. Like Blaziken. So if you don't mind, let's take a good look at the voting results that led to Blaziken's ban. This graph here represents those voting results. The blue bars represent votes in favor of bans, while the red sections represent the votes that were opposed to bans. As you can see, Blaziken scored the highest out of the 6. You can see two purple lines on the graph. The lower purple line at 50% represents a single majority. You need 2 of these in a row to be banned, and as you can see, Emerald, Deoxys, and Latios fulfilled this criteria this time around. And the second purple line, which is at 66.6%, represents the supermajority that is required for an instant ban without the need for another round of voting. And as you can see, Blaziken just barely cleared that requirement, but it cleared it nonetheless, so that's why you won't be able to use it on the Smogon standard ladder starting in a few days. I don't know the exact date, but regardless. What happened there? What happened so that Blaziken, which was a huge threat but nothing game-breaking in previous rounds, suddenly rose to prominence like this and managed to get banned? Well, I'm sorry for anyone who's watching this and thinking that it's just Smogon jumping the shark, because they seem to jump the shark every time there's a vote, according to those people, whereas in fact it's just sometimes. Whatever, I'm not here to defend past decisions, I'm here to explain what happened so that this decision actually came to pass. And once you look at what's been banned in the previous rounds of voting, it suddenly starts making a lot more sense. Because in the first 2 rounds of voting, Drizzle was allowed unrestricted, which meant that it dominated everything. Now, Blaziken, being a fire type, didn't exactly thrive in an environment that was full of rain and seconded by sandstorm. However, with the combo ban, rain was nerfed significantly, and the need for sandstorm was lessened, which allowed Blaziken to shine a lot more, especially in combination with Drought. Now, Drought alone isn't enough to explain why Blaziken got banned, but other fire and grass types didn't, like Venusaur and Volcarona, for example. There are other factors, the most obvious one being, of course, Speed Boost, Blaziken's new Dream World ability. Speed Boost effectively patches up Blaziken's, well, actually one of Blaziken's two glaring weaknesses as a sweeper. The other one being its shallow move pool. However, Speed Boost allowed Blaziken to go past its average speed and actually become a more threatening sweeper than Infernape. It was faster, stronger, everything. And on top of that, Blaziken also got an ungodly good gift in the form of High Jump Kick. High Jump Kick's power has been increased twice in the last 2 generations. It went from 85 to 100 in Generation 4, and from 100 to 130 in Generation 5. So what this means is that Blaziken's main 2 forms of attacks have 120 and 130 power off 120 base attack, and the potential for Swords Dance more often than not. Add Drought to that, and you simply got an offensive powerhouse of cataclysmic proportions. That incredible firepower allowed it to 1-hit KO or 2-hit KO pretty much the entire metagame, and unless you were packing a Slowbro, if you encountered a Blaziken, that was pretty much game over right there, which sounds a lot like Garchomp circa 2008. Back when it was first banned, people complained like absolute crazy because it was the first time that a non-Wobbuffet, non-legendary was banned, and it sort of blew everyone's minds because prior to that, other than Wobbuffet, only legendaries were uber, and now Blaziken's sort of breaking the mold in the same way because it's not a pseudo-legendary either. But nonetheless, the Garchomp ban proved to be the right decision back then, and I think Blaziken has the potential to follow down the same road, because, as I said, you pretty much needed a Slowbro to be able to deal with Blaziken without having your team take fatal damage. And usually a good indication of whether a Pokemon is broken or not is if it requires a very specialized counter that pretty much wouldn't get used otherwise, and Slowbro fits that criteria. I'm not saying that it's the only way to determine whether something's broken or not, but it's usually a pretty good clue. So, in a nutshell, is Blaziken worthy of its newfound status? Well, I think everyone instantly thought, what were they thinking when they did that? And I'm no exception, but after doing some research, looking at all the sides of the story, I pretty much agree with that decision. Even though it may look nonsensical right now, I can guarantee that further down the road, it's going to make a lot more sense. And one complaint that is usually leveled at Smogon is the fact that they're way too ban-happy. That is something that I would disagree with. Why? Look at the graph once again, if you will. Latios, from day one, has been the subject of a significant push to try and get it banned. However, it took 3 rounds for it to get a simple majority. So, I would say that they're far less ban-happy than people are giving them credit for. Because comparing Blaziken and Latios, as I said, Latios from day one was labeled as a top threat even though it only just now got a first majority. The reason for that is because Latios is simply very strong at all levels of play. Whether you're a top player, a very good player, a good player, an average player, whatever, Latios is sure to be a fantastic asset to your team. Whereas Blaziken, I think, requires a lot more skill to be used correctly, but if you manage to use it correctly, then the payoff is much greater. And just like in any competitive game, the tier list is usually decided depending on how the very top players are able to compose with the situations featuring those characters or Pokemon. So, of course, players that are less talented, not to mention the masses of noobs over at GameFAQs, of course they're not really going to understand these results. However, at the top of the ladder, Blaziken pretty much two-hit KOs the entire metagame, as I said. So that's too strong for that particular level of play, and thus it is banned for everyone. Like it or not, that's the way it goes. So I'd say that the people who think these results simply have no rhyme or reason are pretty much in the wrong. And I have another graph here that's going to illustrate that point. This graph represents Latios' results from all 3 rounds of suspect voting. Now, as you can see, there's been a substantial increase of votes in favor of a ban from round to round. The reason why that happened is because Latios' counters and checks kept getting banned one after the other, after the other, after the other in the first 2 rounds. So what happens when you take away all the checks and counters to a certain Pokemon? That Pokemon becomes more and more dominant, and that's pretty much what's happening here. So the point I'm trying to make is that there is pretty much always a logical reason for why the voting results turn out the way they do. We're talking about 40 to 50 of the best players around here. I don't think they take that kind of decision by flipping a coin and decides if they're not sure. They always have the option to abstain if they want to. So that's about it. I made this video to try and make people understand why Blaziken was now banned. If I succeeded, well, that's awesome, and if I didn't, well, I apologize for wasting 12 minutes of your time. So with that said, good night, and remember, don't count your Torchics before they hatch.